And when it came to applying, what were some of the first steps you took?
I think for me, doing a DPhil, one of the first steps I took was to see what kind of projects there were running and if there was sort of an opening for students. Every program is sort of different. Sometimes they like you to apply and then get allocated to a project. Sometimes they're already advertising for a project. But that was the first step for me. And then after that, once I'd kind of honed in on a supervisor or an area, just kind of learning more about that and then actually reaching out to the supervisor and seeing if, their communication style, their laboratory, their research interests, they align well with mine, because that's kind of the main focus, I feel, for a DPhil. You want to make sure that your interests are aligned with your supervisor and that you two get along and have similar goals. So yeah, that was the first thing that I did.
After a thorough review of the website for the course, I actually contacted my course lead to try and establish a bit of initial connection there, because I thought, first of all, I'd get a good insight into the person, one of the key people I'd be learning from, but at the same time, for my application, it would help them put a face to a name, which hopefully would help me stand out a little bit. And to gain a greater insight into the course, I actually reached out to people on LinkedIn who had the course in their profile, just for further insight and further tips. And I think that was probably the most valuable thing that I did in guiding my application and making sure I was really hitting the mark.
So firstly, what I did obviously is go through the course website and looked at what they were expecting to see from my application. And that is one thing that Oxford does very well. They make sure that they give you a detailed requirement of what you're supposed to put into your personal statement or any other documents you're supposed to submit. So they were very clear in terms of the program on what to expect and what to read from me and what they want to know about me and why I want to study that particular course. So I did that first, did a lot of research, and I also spoke to a few people whom I knew that were studying in Oxford, and just asked for their guidance to give me tips about how to structure my essay and how to write it at a format that Oxford will actually accept.
Yeah, so one of the first steps that I took was to identify people that pursued the program that I did at the Oxford Internet Institute. So looking at being from Canada, Canadian alumni from the program, seeing what they are up to and reaching out and chatting with them over Zoom about their experiences in the program, trying to get a sense of whether or not it might be a good fit for me.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate enough to actually go through the Oxford application process through a scholarship. So I applied to Oxford through the Rhodes Scholarship. Some of the first steps were engaging with my university, speaking to advisors to understand what the options look like to come to Oxford, even if I wasn't lucky enough to receive the Rhodes Scholarship. And then just really working to refine my application, my essays, understanding what my true inner motivation for being at a place like this was, and then tying all those little life experiences together to create a really cohesive story.
With regards to the statement of purpose, what were some of the things you did for that?
I tried to be hyper specific about why I was applying to this course above all others. So not just that it's a great course or that I like the look of it, but what individual modules, which members of staff, which bits of research I might want to get involved in. I just tried to make it seem or get the idea across that I would benefit maximally from this course in particular, and with that I tried to make it really specific where I would go with that course and the skills I would gain and how they would help me move forward into a career.
So in my statement of purpose, obviously what I did first, and the few tips I can give, is you need to be able to connect the course that you want to study with maybe things that your own experiences, whether it's career-wise or just something that you do for fun. For instance, I am a fervent women and girls' rights activist, and when I was applying for the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, I needed to show how that connects and why I really wanted to study that program. And some of it is that I just wanted to understand, the history of women's fight for liberation, and also just getting an idea of how to structure certain things when it comes to my work in the gender sphere, and you should be able to, connect that and with the program that you want to study. And for my MPP, when I was writing it, it's just now that I've gotten that background and the foundation, what do I want to do in policy work, and how does gender sort of like match that? So you see, you just should be able to build the connection between your experiences, your personal experiences, your career experiences, and most importantly, what Oxford and the course offers, and how does that merge?
Yeah, I think, for me, writing my statement of purpose was very much a process of exploration. I think prior to applying to Oxford, I knew what I was interested about pretty concretely, but I hadn't really taken the moment to tie all of these small events, including events from my childhood, through high school, through undergrad, together to really weave that cohesive story. I think, taking the chance to craft that story, taking a chance to really list out all the small experiences I had since I was a kid that led me to this point now was the most important thing that I did. And really taking some time to look inward without the outward influences that many people have of getting people to edit their essays.
Yeah, so I definitely recommend really taking time to reflect and think about your motivation for applying. Why is it that this program is a good fit for you from both the perspective of the research that you want to pursue and how it might fit into what you want to do after the program. So taking a lot of time to just reflect on that and thinking about what got you to this point and why the program really speaks to you.
Yeah, I would say be succinct, be detailed. It's kind of easy to throw in things like, I really want to develop my research skill set, but be specific about what you want to develop, what you want to get better at, and also be specific about your past experience. Why would you be a good candidate? What are some sort of accomplishments or things like that you can list that would make an admissions committee go, hey, I feel like that person would be really productive in a DPhil role. And this is kind of a little bit at odds with the other advice, but I think you have to integrate both together. While you're specific, I think also looking at the big picture is really important, because I feel like committees want to know that you have kind of long-term goals and you can see how your project fits in sort of the larger literature and the larger sort of industry or field.
Did you have an interview? And if so, how did you prepare for that?
I did have an interview, and I had to submit a research proposal as part of my application, which was for a master's as well as a DPhil combined into one. So the interview was largely based around my research proposal, and I prepared by thinking about trying to really make sure that every single piece of that proposal I had understood inside and out, the justification for why I proposed the research method and the theoretical framework and what the wider implications of the research were, and thinking about any question from different angles that I could get around why I proposed this type of research, and thinking about kind of trying to really justify and thoroughly have a grasp of why the research is important.
I did have an interview. From what I've heard, all the interviews at Oxford are super different. So I had a 3-person panel interview. And the general tips I would have for preparing for it are, number one, again, think about what your motivation is for doing the program that you're doing. What do you want to get out of it? What makes doing a program at Oxford different from doing that same program at any other university? And, general questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Yada, yada, yada. They kind of always bring questions like that up. But then also know about your research proposal, right? Generally, people don't expect you to know everything because you're not an expert in your field, but know about what you've written about and be kind of prepared to answer some questions about that. And then I would probably practice a little bit of thinking on your feet, maybe trying to practice interpreting a figure or interpreting some kind of conclusion. So if there is an element like that in your interview, you're able to kind of break down your thought process and share that with the committee.
Yeah, I had a couple interviews. Separately from the scholarship interview, I interviewed for my master's program and then also for my DPhil program just a few months ago. And I really tried to prepare for those interviews by really focusing on weaving a concrete personal narrative of where I started out from a long time ago and how I got to where I was now. And the second thing was really focusing on on the academics here at Oxford. And how my academic accomplishments set me out from many of my peers, with the special caveat of trying to lean into the things that made me unique as a candidate rather than maybe what I would think as the quintessential Oxford student, one of those things being entrepreneurship. So one advice that I would give to many students is if you have those small experiences that you feel like are maybe non-academic or outside of the norm, lean into those rather than lean out.
Thankfully, I didn't have an interview, so I had a statement of purpose, a written sample, 3 academic references, and I think that was it. So thankfully, no interview.
So if you could go back to yourself sort of a few years ago before you applied, what piece of advice do you think you would give?
So I think one piece of advice that I would have given myself when applying to Oxford would have been to be able to align my career choices properly. I mean, now it's working out fine, don't get me wrong. But initially, when I wanted to study here, my thought was, oh, I'm going to do women's gender and sexuality studies. And then I was so passionate about film. I had done a little bit in film training. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do film aesthetics. But when I got into Oxford, by the time I finished my first program, that had entirely changed. So it's totally okay not to know what you want to do, but then as long as by the time you get to the end of your program, you're able to figure yourself out and know what direction your career is taking and what are the perfect courses or combination of courses that can help you do that, then it's definitely worth trying.
I would say take some time to think about what you want out of the program, because a lot of it at Oxford, in my experience, has been very self-directed, and you can't necessarily rely on the program structure to give you the opportunities to sort of develop every single skill set that you want to develop. So I would recommend or if I could go back and talk to myself, I would say sit down and think about, what do you really want out of this DPhil degree? Is it just research skills? Is it teaching skills? Is it skills that you would require if you went into industry? And then you can kind of think about, what can I do to supplement my DPhil work to gain these skills, whether that's joining societies or signing up to lead tutorials, etc.
Yeah, I think a piece of advice would definitely be, I think, funny enough to kind of let the end result kind of happen as it will. I think I see a lot of students who really endue themselves with a lot of pressure to have the end result of getting to an Oxford or getting to a Cambridge, or maybe if you're from the States, a Stanford, MIT. I think kind of letting go from the pressures of having to actually get to the end result makes it easier to actually flow into that result. I think at the end of the day, no matter where you go, your character and the things that you accomplish are defined by who you are as a person, and not necessarily just the external environment that you place yourself in, as beautiful as this place is.
That's a good question. I would recommend, as I said previously, just really taking time to think about this. Why Oxford? Why the program? Is it that you are kind of you do want to go into academia, for instance, and it's a really great fit in terms of finding a supervisor here who you really understand and respect the work of, that you want to form a relationship and be mentored by over the next couple of years? Is it that you want to go into policy or government, industry, etc.? And you might not know. I've changed my mind a lot over the last couple of years about what I want to do after the program. But thinking about kind of when you get to Oxford, how are you going to make the most of your time here? And I think it's kind of in many ways a function of what you make of it. And there's so many different things to explore here when it comes to so many different lectures going on all the time, and meeting really cool people, and diving into a really specific area, becoming potentially an expert in your field, or you could do a program that allows you to be more of a generalist. So just having a sense of it's a really exciting adventure, and how you want to make the most of it.
Well, one piece of advice that I tried to give myself in the moment was just say yes to everything. And I would just try and do that even more. There are endless opportunities that come your way and that came my way, and just saying yes to as many of them as possible. Even if you feel like you've got a lot on, it's really part of the experience, whether it's social side or going to a conference or whatever. Try and cram in as much as you can, especially if you're there for a one-year course, because time really does fly.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think a general thing I'd like to add is that I feel like looking at a university like Oxford, it sort of seems a bit larger than life, and a place where it's really easy to think there's sort of no way I would be able to get in, or there's no point in me applying. And my biggest tip for any application or really anything in life is don't count yourself out, because when you count yourself out or you don't even send an application in, that's kind of the only way you're guaranteeing that you'll never attend the school. Just by giving a shot, I think you open up so many doors, and if anything, it's just good practice because, it's good to go through the application process, and it can be kind of daunting. So I feel like if you do it, you do gain a bit of confidence in the process. But yeah, don't count yourself out, because I definitely, if you had asked me, wouldn't have said that I would ever get in or be able to study here. But things work out, and you never know unless you try.
I think if you're from the States, I'll offer this as a thing. I think Oxford is an amazing place to be. There are many great educational institutions all over the US, but being here in the UK, having the chance to travel with friends, having the chance to engage with a wide number of international people who are living life right here in this part of the world is a tremendous opportunity. Highly recommend to many of my statesmen, but then also to other people from across the world who maybe never thought that this could be an opportunity that's for them.
Best of luck to everyone who's applying, and if you are lucky enough to make it here, then I'm sure you'll have the best time. It was the best year of my life.